Back in 2015, streaming felt like the future finally arriving. Netflix cost $7.99 for its standard plan. Hulu's ad-free tier was under $10. Amazon bundled Prime Video into a membership most people were already paying for. 3 services, roughly $30 a month, and you could watch almost anything. It was the first time entertainment felt simple. No cable boxes, no surprise fees, no contracts with tiny print. You opened an app, pressed play, and the show was just there. Students were leaving behind entire binders of DVDs. Households cut the cord in record numbers. Even tech skeptics admitted that Netflix was easier than rummaging through torrent folders or dodging malware on sketchy sites. For a few years, it genuinely worked. If a show was not on Netflix, it was probably on Hulu. If it was not on Hulu, it was on Amazon. The entire ecosystem rested on an unspoken agreement: keep it affordable, keep it simple, and people will happily pay. But by the late 2010s, that balance started to wobble. Netflix began producing more originals than any studio in Hollywood. Hulu expanded into live TV. Amazon bought entire catalogs outright. The costs behind the scenes were exploding, even as subscription prices stayed low. And buried deep in investor calls, executives began saying the quiet part out loud. If people are willing to pay $8 for convenience, maybe they are willing to pay more. That was the moment everything shifted, quietly, gradually, but decisively. Streaming was still thriving, but the foundation that made it beloved was already beginning to crack. The first warning sign appeared around 2019. Netflix raised its standard plan from $10.99 to $12.99, a small increase, but the biggest jump in the company's history at the time. People shrugged it off. A dollar or two didn't feel like much when Netflix was still the center of the streaming universe. But that was only the beginning. By 2021, nearly every major platform followed the same playbook. Hulu pushed its ad-free plan past the $12 mark. Amazon quietly bumped Prime Video along with its Prime membership fee. Even Apple, the newcomer, raised prices less than 3 years after launching its service. And as each company made its move, the industry began to look less like a set of competing innovators and more like a group of studios watching each other's margins. The promise of affordable entertainment slowly dissolved. What used to cost one monthly payment now required 3 or 4. Viewers who once bragged about saving money by cutting cable suddenly found themselves adding up apps the way they used to add up channels. A family that paid $30 a month in 2016 was paying closer to $60 by 2022, and that was before factoring in add-ons like live sports or 4K upgrades. None of this happened in one shocking moment. It happened through steady, incremental steps. Price increases were announced in press releases. New tiers were introduced with confusing names. Features once included are now locked behind more expensive plans. But each small change chipped away at the original value streaming promised. And as the costs rose, a new frustration grew. People felt that the companies who built their success on affordability were slowly abandoning the very idea that made streaming appealing in the first place. And the more money viewers spent, the more they began asking a question the industry did not expect. If we are paying more than ever, why does it feel like we are getting less? Around 2020, the streaming landscape changed almost overnight. Disney Plus pulled its entire library from Netflix, everything from Pixar to Marvel, and funneled it into Disney Plus, which launched with a bold promise: all your favorites in one place. NBC followed, pulling The Office to launch Peacock. Warner Media reclaimed Friends and Harry Potter for HBO Max. Even Paramount launched its own platform to house older Nickelodeon shows and CBS hits. In less than 2 years, the unified library people relied on shattered into pieces. Suddenly, the show you planned to binge was no longer on Netflix. The movie you saved for the weekend moved to another app. That comfort show you rewatched every year was now behind a different subscription entirely. The shift wasn't accidental, it was strategic. Studios realized that instead of licensing content for millions, they could build their own platforms and hope to earn billions. Each company wanted its own streaming empire, complete with exclusive libraries, flagship originals, and premium-priced tiers. By 2021, the average household was not choosing between Netflix and Hulu anymore. They were juggling 5 platforms just to keep up with the shows they already loved, and the monthly cost, once a fraction of cable, was creeping dangerously close to the very model streaming was meant to replace. Consumers felt the fragmentation instantly. A family wanting classic Disney movies, they needed Disney Plus. Sports fans, they might need ESPN Plus. or a live television add-on. Anything from HBO, it was only available on their rebranded HBO Max app. Popular sitcoms, split between Peacock, Paramount Plus, and Hulu. The simplicity that defined early streaming had evaporated. What existed now was a digital patchwork of subscriptions, each necessary for only one or two shows. For years, viewers had been promised that streaming was the antidote to cable. By 2022, it looked suspiciously like cable reinvented, just spread across a dozen different apps. And as people's watch lists scattered across services, frustration quietly turned into something more dangerous for the industry. Indifference. If finding a show meant opening 4 different apps, some users simply stopped trying. Others searched for places where everything was still in one place, even if those places were not legal. By 2022, the frustration was already building, but one decision pushed it over the edge. For nearly a decade, password sharing was treated like a harmless part of streaming culture. Netflix joked about it on social media. Hulu quietly encouraged it by letting multiple screens stream at once. Families shared accounts across states without thinking twice. But in early 2023, that entire philosophy flipped. Netflix announced that accounts would now be tied to a primary location, verified through home Wi-Fi check-ins. If you tried to log in from a dorm, an airport, or even a second home, you were met with a warning screen demanding verification. Sharing with a sibling or adult child meant paying an extra monthly fee. And if you did not, the service simply locked you out. It wasn't just a policy change, it felt like a betrayal. The same behavior Netflix celebrated in 2017 was suddenly labeled misuse. And the ripple effect was immediate. Within months, Disney+, Hulu, and even Max confirmed they would follow the same model. Password sharing, one of the last conveniences keeping families loyal to streaming, became a premium feature. Meanwhile, prices continued rising. Hulu increased its ad-free tier again. Disney Plus added new restrictions and a more expensive ultimate plan. Netflix raised the price of its basic plan while removing it for new users altogether. Every service demanded more money while offering fewer allowances than before. For the average household, streaming no longer felt like freedom, it felt like monitoring. Parents traveling for work found themselves locked out of their own accounts. College students returned home for the holidays only to be flagged as outsiders. Customers who had been loyal for a decade were suddenly treated like potential freeloaders. What cracked wasn't just patience, it was trust. People realized the industry had shifted from competing for viewers to policing them. And once that line was crossed, many began quietly exploring alternatives, not because they wanted to break the rules, but because the rules stopped feeling reasonable. This was the moment the streaming giants expected customers to comply. Instead, customers started leaving. While streaming companies tightened restrictions and raised prices, something else was happening quietly in the background. The old world of piracy, the messy, unreliable, virus-ridden chaos of the early 2010s, was being replaced by something far more polished. By the mid-2020s, piracy sites did not look like back-alley corners of the internet anymore. They looked like real platforms, smooth interfaces, organized catalogs, instant streaming buttons that worked on phones, tablets, and smart TVs. If you opened one without context, you might mistake it for an official app, and users noticed. Shows that had vanished from major platforms, removed during cost-cutting, licensing shifts, or quiet internal disputes, were still there. Movies that were split across 4 different subscriptions were collected neatly in a single library. Foreign titles blocked in certain regions were fully accessible, no VPN required. The experience was not just comparable to legal streaming. In many ways, it felt like the version of streaming people originally signed up for. No auto-playing ads, no rotating catalogs, no surprise removals, no upgrade prompts to watch in high definition. It was the simplicity that Netflix and Hulu used to offer, before every studio decided it needed its own app, its own subscription, its own exclusive rights. And users did not switch out of rebellion, they switched out of exhaustion. A parent who cannot find the show their kid loved because it moved platforms again does not want a lecture about licensing agreements. A college student who gets blocked from their family account because they logged in from campus does not want to pay another fee. People who once paid for convenience simply wanted convenience back. And if the legal options were not offering it anymore, the illegal ones quietly stepped in. Streaming had spent years teaching viewers what a good digital experience should feel like. Piracy simply followed the lesson and executed it better. For the first time in more than a decade, viewers looked at the polished, unrestricted alternatives the internet offered and realized something the industry never expected. The pirates were doing customer service better than the corporations. By the time the streaming giants were tightening passwords and rolling out new premium tiers, younger viewers had already adapted. This was the first generation raised entirely in the on-demand era, people who grew up with YouTube autoplay, same-day digital releases, and entire shows dropping at once. To them, waiting for content to move platforms felt archaic. Paywalls felt arbitrary. Regional blocks felt absurd. So when a series disappeared from Netflix in the middle of a rewatch, or when a movie they wanted was locked behind yet another subscription, they didn't argue with the system, they just bypassed it. Gen Z didn't discover piracy the way older generations did. They weren't downloading files from sketchy sites or digging through forums. They entered a world where everything was already streaming somewhere, sometimes legally, sometimes not, and the difference didn't feel as clear as it used to. They still paid for the major services. Many paid for multiple ones. But they weren't willing to juggle 5 subscriptions for a single show or wait months for content to return to a platform. If something was missing from the legal options, they filled the gaps themselves. And because the tools were simple, often just a search bar and a play button, this didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like efficiency. The logic was straightforward. If a show moved platforms, they found the platform where it never moved. If an episode was region locked, they used the version that wasn't. If a movie required an upgrade, they found a source that didn't. For older generations, this behavior looked like entitlement. For younger generations, it looked like common sense. Streaming companies expected loyalty, but Gen Z wasn't loyal to brands, they were loyal to convenience. And the moment streaming stopped being convenient, they reshaped their viewing habits without hesitation. By the mid-2020s, their approach had quietly become the new normal. Use the official platforms for what's easy. Use alternatives for what's missing. Pay, but don't wait. Watch, but don't search endlessly. Stay legal until legal becomes complicated. This wasn't a loud revolt. It was a silent migration. And it signaled something the industry had never faced before, a generation that refuses to struggle for content. Inside the major streaming companies, the warning signs were not subtle. Customer support tickets spiked every time a show changed platforms. Cancellation spikes appeared immediately after price increases. Internal surveys showed a steady rise in one complaint above all others: "I can't find anything anymore." But instead of slowing down, the industry pushed harder. Between 2021 and 2024, almost every major platform increased prices at least twice. Some removed cheaper tiers altogether. Others introduced premium tiers that cost nearly as much as traditional cable add-ons. Max launched a new Ultimate tier. Disney Plus tied 4K playback to its most expensive plan. Even basic features such as simultaneous streams and offline downloads became bargaining chips. Executives treated viewers like they had no other options. They believed people would simply absorb the new costs, grumble, and move on. What they underestimated was fatigue. By 2023, earnings calls that once celebrated record subscriber growth shifted to phrases like churn challenges and revenue stabilization. Disney restructured its streaming division 3 times in 2 years. Warner Bros. Discovery merged, rebranded, unmerged divisions, and cut entire libraries to manage debt. Paramount floated the idea of selling its streaming service outright. Stock prices reflected the confusion. Platforms that had once been Silicon Valley darlings became riskier bets. Analysts publicly questioned whether the streaming boom had reached its limit. In boardrooms, the tone shifted from optimism to damage control. Executives tried bundling platforms together again: Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, combined into one package. Warner partnered with sports leagues. Paramount leaned on live news. It was the same strategy cable companies used in the 2000s, repackaged for the app era. But bundling did not solve the core issue. Viewers did not want to manage several platforms. They wanted one platform that worked. And the companies that built their empires on simplicity now found themselves trapped in a system built on fragmentation. The fallout was not instantaneous. It was slow, steady erosion. People watched fewer originals, waited to subscribe until a show finished airing, canceled after a month, and rotated through services instead of staying loyal year-round. Streaming had not collapsed, but its grip on viewers had loosened. And for the first time since Netflix arrived on the scene, the industry had to face a truth it never planned for. People were no longer afraid to walk away. Streaming didn't break because people stopped loving movies and shows. It broke because the system designed to deliver them drifted away from the values that made it successful in the first place. The early promise was simple: one affordable subscription, one reliable library, everything in one place. By the mid-2020s, that world was gone. Instead of building a single great platform, every studio built its own. Instead of making streaming cheaper than cable, it became nearly as expensive. Instead of rewarding loyal users, companies introduced restrictions, add-ons, and sudden removals, and people responded the way they always do when an industry stops listening. They found another path, not a perfect path, not a legal one, but one that solved the frustrations streaming created. When a family show vanished mid-season, piracy still had it. When a movie moved to a platform people did not subscribe to, piracy did not ask for another monthly fee. When a student got locked out for using their own login away from home, piracy did not demand verification. The message wasn't subtle. It wasn't angry. It was simply practical. If you make entertainment hard to access, people will go where it's easy. Now the industry is trying to rewind. Bundles are coming back. Prices are being trimmed. Studios are quietly licensing content again instead of hiding it behind exclusive walls. Some platforms have even reversed parts of their password policies after backlash. But trust doesn't return on command. Once viewers learn they have alternatives, and once those alternatives become part of their routine, the damage is hard to undo. The future of streaming depends on whether these companies remember what made them powerful in the first place: convenience, reliability, and fairness. If they rebuild around those principles, people will come back. If they don't, the fragmentation and frustration of the early 2020s will be remembered as the turning point when audiences took control instead of waiting for the industry to fix itself. Streaming changed entertainment once. It can change again, for better or worse. And the direction it takes next won't be decided by executives or shareholders. It'll be decided by the people choosing what to watch tonight.